Welcome everyone, I'm Jessica Morgan, and this is a Domestic Violence Awareness Month special, brought to you by Survivors Outreach Ministries and Changing Her Story Ministries. Tonight, we're facing a truth that's rarely spoken, but painfully real. Across the United States, when domestic violence occurs, victims are often told to leave, while the abuser stays. It's a system built on survival, not justice. And tonight we're going to be talking about why that has to change. The shelter system. Safety with limits. Domestic violence shelters save lives every single day. They are places of refuge, safety, and healing. But they're also overburdened, underfunded, and often inaccessible to many who need them. I don't know how many times I've heard victims I've actually called in with the victims, and they've been told that they don't have no space available, they have a waiting list, and so forth. Every night, thousands of survivors of children are turned away because there simply isn't room. Some shelters only allow 30 to 60-day stays. Now, granted, you do have those shelters who may let you stay 90 days. So I have seen some, depending upon the situation. 4 to 6, maybe 4 to 6 months. That's very rarely that I've seen that done. Some do not take pets. Actually, most do not take pets. Majority of the shelters throughout the country do not take pets. We are lucky that here in Central Florida, we do have, near Tampa, that we do have a shelter who actually does take pets. But like I said, some of these shelters do not take pets or teenage sons. There is a cutoff limit a lot of times at the DV shelters for victims who have teenage sons between 15 to 17 years old. And others require survivors to leave their jobs or schools to stay hidden. We tell victims to leave, but where are they supposed to go? So you hear it constantly said, well, why'd you go back? Well, why did you go back? Because I was only allowed to stay at the damn shelter for 30 to 60 days. Now I'm homeless. That's why I left. That's why I went back. That's why I went back. That's why most victims go back. Leaving doesn't always mean freedom. For many, it means losing everything. Their homes, their support systems, and their sense of normalcy. They uproot their children. And yes, there is a program that they offer called McKinney-Vento in most jurisdictions. The McKinney-Vento program is to enroll your children in school if you are homeless. So now a victim is homeless. Now granted, she's considered homeless because of domestic violence. And sometimes she has her name on the deed as well as her name on the lease. But she was the one that was told to leave with her children. And so now she's quote unquote homeless. But that program allows victims who are staying at a DV shelter to enroll their children in the closest school connected to the shelter. Now that means that these children are uprooted from their friends, their teachers. While the situation what they're experiencing domestic violence at home may be a trauma within itself, the added layer of trauma that is caused by them being uprooted from their fellow classmates as well as their teachers, that compounds the trauma for these children. This is a systemic failure. When police respond to domestic violence calls, they often separate the parties. You know how that goes, right? Separate the parties. He says, she said most of the time. But that separation usually means the victim leaves, not the abuser. I don't know how many times I have seen the police ask the victim, well, do you have somewhere to go? Do you have friends or family that you can stay with? I rarely ever see them asking the abuser. The only time that the abuser is asked to leave is when the abuser is acting crazy, period. So that's the only time I see that. Or they arrest the abuser because there is visual signs of bruises, a scratch, marks, and so forth. But that separation usually means the victim leaves, not the abuser once again. The system prioritizes temporary peace. Temporary peace. You know why it's temporary? Because the truth about domestic violence is it does not stop when you leave. It does not stop when you leave. There is also something called post-separation abuse. This is where the abuser uses and weaponizes the family court system to harass their victim and to drain them additionally to remove the kids. It does not just stop. Let's just make that clear, you guys. It does not stop when you leave. Sometimes it actually gets worse. I have heard many, me myself included, my story as a survivor of domestic violence was the abuse that I endured during the relationship was not near as bad as what I went through dealing with the family court system. Period. That trauma from the separating and being in the court system was way worse than any of the domestic violence that I experienced while I was in the relationship. And that is just the truth. Law enforcement may lack the authority to remove an abuser. So even if you get a domestic violence protective order granted that says they're not to be in the home, this is still a civil order. Police mainly do criminal. They don't do civil. Courts often delay as well or deny the protective orders. I don't know how many times when I was experiencing domestic violence, we killed trees. I'm telling you, we killed an entire forest when I was going through my experience. Like, it is called a fat file. If I asked for my files with what I went through with my abuser, they had to wheel it out. It didn't slide underneath the glass. They had to go grab it, put it on one of the carts, and wheel it out to me. I don't know how many times I filed. I think the first one I filed was in 2014. I had pictures. I had evidence, everything. Denied. I don't know how many times they delayed it or they denied it when I was trying to get my restraining order. And I know that I have heard that same exact story from victims. I have even witnessed this with my clients. I'm looking at I'm like, are you serious? He just hit her in the head with a bat. Thank God she's not dead, but she was in the hospital. And you're going to deny her restraining order? Oh, you want to set a court hearing and you want to hear everybody's story. Or she calls a DV shelter and they give her resources and say they don't got a bed. That part. Survivors are told the same thing over and over and over again. It's a broken record. Go to a shelter. Stay with family. Find somewhere safe. But why isn't the system built to remove the abuser instead of displacing victims? That's the heartbreaking question survivors and advocates. I'm an advocate and I'm also a survivor as well. Ask every single day, and rarely do we ever get an answer. I have actually sat there with clients where they have been granted a restraining order. They call the police go there to serve it. The police are, even though it says in the court order that it has been granted and that that the abuser needs to leave the home, the police are still like, well, his name's on the lease, his name's on the deed. Do you have somewhere else to go? I had a case here in the last, maybe about the last 3 months. A woman reached out to an organization and asked, she was sending videos, she asked, she needed help. And a lot of times people thought that we were a shelter. We have never been a shelter. We have been a peer support domestic violence advocacy organization to where we share our experience, strength, and hope with other survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. And we help them navigate resources, advocate for them within the court system and within other agencies as well. So told her, because she had called the police, and she was given a list of resources and so forth, and ours was on it. That has always been something that I'm like, why do the victims always have to leave? Because I remember having to leave my own apartment that was in my name. My name was on a lease, his wasn't. But I was the one told to leave and had to go to shelter. I'm like, ain't this some BS? Straight up, this is some straight up BS right here. And so she sent that information to me. And what I did was I was like, no, you're not leaving. So both their names, they were not married, but both of their names were on the deed, right? Excuse me. I was like, no, you're not leaving. So I've never operated in a traditional approach, and those of you who know me know that I'm kind of I've always been outside the box. So unlike going with the paper form, during COVID, we thank God for e-courts. Good thing about COVID was we have Zoom court, we have WebEx court, and also now we have e-file to where you can file even the restraining orders and so forth online. Now, the victims, they usually do that themselves. However, we offered where we would assist them with completing the domestic violence protective orders. In some jurisdictions are called restraining orders, some other jurisdictions are called injunctions. But we would help them with their order, and we would do a Zoom and a share screen. So this individual, she was sending us videos of him being verbally, mentally, emotionally abusive to her and her daughter. A lot of mental, verbal, and emotional abuse. Some physical, and she was very smart. She had cameras up around the house that he did not know about. She had a dash cam thing hidden. She was a vet, and so she was very on point with it. And she said, and so we were just building this. So when we filed her, when I assisted her with going online to file her restraining order, she was able to take those videos and upload it as evidence. So it got granted, right? But I consistently told her, no, you're not leaving. You're going to stay there in the home, and he's going to leave. And that's exactly what happened, is that we were able to advocate with her in court to make sure that he was removed out of the residence, and then also proceeded to assist her with getting resources. And luckily she was one of those who did have family support, and so she was able to get an attorney and file to have him removed from the deed of the home, so her and her child could stay there. And she did have the financial resources as well to be able to take care of her and her child. But that's what I'm saying, is that she was initially told from the beginning by law enforcement, by family and friends. But I'm like, no, you ain't leaving. You ain't going no damn where. You and your child are going to stay there in your home. Your name is on the deed, and that's where you're going to stay. So, like I said, survivors hear all the time, you're the one who has to disappear to stay safe. It places the burden of safety on the survivor, not the abuser, not the system, and not the community. And it's always bothered me that way, is that you're being told to leave, but you're not the one doing it. And then society shames victims when they go back. And some of these shows, and I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to address that in another video in November. Some of these shelters, let me try not to cuss, because I'm working on that, y'all. You guys got to work with me. I'm working on that a little bit, because some of these things irritate the crap out of me, and I may drop, it's some BS, okay? It's some straight up BS, and I've seen it. I'm just like, what in the hell is going on here? I remember one incident where I had a pregnant victim. She was assaulted, thrown down the stairs by her abuser. She was 7 months pregnant, Luckily, the community, the apartment complex, they came out, and another woman who was a survivor of domestic violence herself at the apartment complex, she ended up going and getting her gun and pointed at the abuser who was throwing this woman, dragging her down the flight of stairs, and said, if you keep it up, I will shoot the crap out of you. And so I'm grateful for that community, for that neighborhood, for that apartment complex that came out and rallied around that victim. But the apartment was in his name. And so we were able to, she reached out to us once again, thinking that we're a shelter. She wanted to do a victim's impact statement and also file some other also file for some other stuff with the state. They luckily did charge him. One thing I love about Florida, I'm gonna be honest with you, Florida does not play. Okay, Florida does not play whatsoever. I am from North Carolina. I experienced DV in North Carolina. And of all things, I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and y'all can just watch my other videos of how I feel about Charlotte, North Carolina, and their court process. Period. I don't hide it. So, but North Carolina, they didn't do nothing. If I would have went through what I went through here in Florida, with domestic violence wise, he would have been underneath the jail. So, but Florida, they're on it. This is a FO state. Now, we have crime here, yes. But the thing about Florida is if you commit a crime here, you are definitely going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, period. So we were able, so she reached out to us. He was charged. They didn't have no space. Well, she wanted to go to the shelter in the Tampa area. I'm gonna be nice right now and not give the name of that shelter. It's a big one. I ain't gonna lie. I like the small domestic violence shelters. I don't like the large domestic violence shelters. I have seen better work from the very small ones in the smaller communities, smaller counties that give the best services to victims of domestic violence. These large DV shelters, yeah, I'm gonna address that in November. So we were able to help her pack up her belongings. We put them in one of our storage units that we had, and we were able to go. We first took her to that one, which the criteria was you get approved to go into the shelter, then you have to go to the sheriff's department. And look, they don't even let the victims inside at this place, okay? The sheriff's department does not let the victims inside to sit there and wait whatsoever. The victims sit outside with their kids and wait for that shelter to send an Uber or Lyft. There's no covering at all. They're just going to sit out there beside the sheriff's. You can't go inside the sheriff's department. You got to sit out there on the damn bench and wait for the Lyft or the Uber to come to take you to the shelter. I mean, at the very least, they could put a canopy or something over top of it. What if it's raining? Luckily, we live in Florida, so it's either going to be hot as hell or it's going to be raining. But seriously, I just thought that was crazy. I hadn't seen that one before. So we ended up getting her into another domestic violence shelter in a different county. I absolutely love them. They are amazing. They do some great work. They're one of the ones I was talking about that actually have a place for pets. And they do not offer, they offer a lot of stuff. So that is one of my favorites. And it is a smaller one. So getting back, reimagine safety. Remove the abuser, not the survivor. That is what we have to, going forward, that is a mindset that we need to have. We have told victims and their children for decades to leave, to go to the shelter, to go to the shelter, go to the shelter, go to the shelter. It is time that we change that narrative and change that message to where it is remove the abuser, not the victim. In fact, we need to, in my personal opinion, we need to have abuser shelters, okay? Where If you get called, the abuser has to call the hotline. The abuser has to call the shelter and go there. And then if they don't have nowhere to go, they can sleep in their car. That's what some victims do when they're children, is they leave. And if they don't have no space at a shelter, they end up sleeping in their car. So it is seriously time. I don't even know how that makes, that's never made sense to me. Never. And we have been asked numerous times, like, why don't you start a domestic violence shelter? Why don't you start a domestic violence shelter? No. If I did anything, I would start an abuser shelter. And I would advocate and everything else and stuff for that. If there is a domestic violence issue, and you can call us and we'll put the abuser in a shelter and stuff. They can stay there and the victim's going to stay at home. Period. Because they need to stay. It is so wrong to tell a vulnerable victim and their children to leave. And then the domino effect is they leave. They lose everything. Some of them end up homeless. When they run out of the 30, 60-day stay limit at the DV shelter, they end up having to go to a homeless shelter with their kids. And like I said earlier, now the abuser has more ammunition that makes them look unstable. So now they're already got trauma. So a lot of them are showing up not what doesn't look well because of trauma. And now they're homeless and so forth. And it's used against them. And the same system that tells the victims to leave ultimately ends up dealing with post-separation. You end up getting post-separation abuse. Because it doesn't just stop when victims leave. Let's get that clear. Let's make that clear. It does not stop when victims leave. If anything, in a lot of situations, it gets worse. I have heard numerous survivors say that what they experienced while they were with the abuser was not near as bad as what they experienced when they left and went through divorce and went through family court. Truthfully, and I have had my own personal experience. Not only am I a survivor of domestic violence, I'm also a survivor of post-separation abuse. What I experienced post-separation abuse, which if you guys don't know what that is where when you leave the abuser, they end up filing court documents for custody visitation, and they weaponize the family court system against their victims through legal abuse, constantly filing paperwork, and the courts a lot of times grant the abuser's custody. My experience after I left was way worse than what I experienced when I was there. And that's just a story that I hear from not just my personal experience, but from the experience of a lot of other survivors of domestic violence. So at Survivors Irish Ministries and Changing Her Story Ministries, we believe real change starts with a new vision and a new narrative. Safety should not mean starting over. It should mean standing strong in your own space, surrounded by community and support. Leaving isn't always safety. Sometimes it's just survival. And that's honestly what it is. Leaving and going to the DV shelters is not always safety. It is just survival. They're like, well, they can't stay in the home because the abusers know where they live at and so forth. My organization over the years, we have assisted with getting numerous abusers removed out the home, and to protect the home of the victims. So an apartment complex, they have been given a trespassing order. We have helped them get trespass off the property to where they cannot be on the property. For homes that are rented, even we have helped survivors. We have bought security cameras to put up at the homes. We have also bought additional locks for garages, for doors, anything that we have helped support them if there have been doors broken, change locks. We have bought locks so they can and actually have assisted victims with getting those locks changed. I have contracted with some carpenters, people that work. They have went in there, actually helped install the security cameras, fixed doors, fixed windows, added latches, and so forth. So, and it's trespassing. So some people argue, well, she needs to leave because he knows where she's at and stuff. You know how many stories I've heard as well where the abuse. Okay, here's the thing too. Let's just be honest. Let's just be clear. If someone wants to hurt you, they're going to hurt you regardless. There are some abusers who they just do not give a damn. Okay? They don't give a damn about the police. They will call the police for you. They don't care about the police whatsoever. There has been abusers that have found their victims at the shelters and actually came inside and killed them. Okay? So, just because you go to the shelter doesn't mean you're safe. Just because you stay in your home and have the abuser removed doesn't mean that you're not safe. So, once again, leaving isn't always safety. Sometimes it's just survival. This October for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, let's commit to changing how we respond to abuse in our homes, in our laws, and in our communities. Because survivors shouldn't lose their homes. Abusers should lose their power and their control. That's it. That's it. Abusers need to be the ones removed from the residence, not the victims. So, I also just want to let you guys know that starting November 2025, Survivors Outreach Ministries will begin a new chapter in our mission to protect victims and their families. For years, we have provided direct personal advocacy across North Carolina and Florida, standing beside survivors as they face broken systems and unjust outcomes. We've seen the harm caused by policy and practices that fail to protect, and now we're ready to take our fight to the next level. Okay? Our focus is shifting from individual advocacy to advocating for policy and legislative change that will create lasting reform across the United States. We're committed to confronting the systemic failures and misguided reforms that do more harm than good. From soft on crime policies to progressive experience disguised as justice reform. Our work will focus on changing laws, challenging harmful narratives like the one that we discussed tonight, and building a justice system that truly protects victims and their families. This transition isn't a departure from our mission, it's an expansion of it. Together, we'll continue standing for truth, accountability, and justice for those who need it most. Also, join me on November 2nd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on The Healing Place. I will be exposing the hidden truths and hypocrisy of the domestic violence industry and the court system. Billion-dollar industry, you guys. This has been The Sad Truth, when victims are told to leave. I'm Jessica Morgan, and together we're changing her story, one voice, one survivor, one truth at a time.